Hi, I'm Nana Akua, and welcome to GBN America. All right, buckle up, because we're about to take a wild ride through Joe Biden's top team. And trust me, it's a journey that you didn't know you needed, but now you can't look away from it. It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck, except somehow the train keeps moving forward slowly, but it's still moving somehow. A collection of people that if they didn't exist, you'd have to invent them. Joe Biden's administration. I mean, where do we even start? People, well-meaning I'm sure, who couldn't organise a 3-car parade, let alone a functioning government. These folks are supposed to be running the country, but half of them probably still think TikTok is some kind of newfangled Swiss watch. I find it actually quite hilarious that the Democrats who put up possibly the worst candidate ever and lost so historically badly have the gall to criticise Donald Trump and his choices. But let's begin with Joe Biden himself, shall we? The big man at the top, a national treasure, some would say. But let's be real, if Joe Biden were a car, he'd be one of those vintage models that starts perfectly fine on the 4th try. And when he does start, it's a slow start, like he's thinking about it. You get the sense that half of the time, Joe forgets what he's supposed to be doing. But when he remembers, it's like a weight has lifted. And then boom, he suddenly says something utterly ridiculous.
It is noteworthy that the percentage of women who register to vote and cast a ballot is consistently higher than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote. Repeat the line. Women are not without electoral and or political, or maybe precise, not and or political power.
He would walk out of the White House with a smile and you could almost see the little text bubble above his head. I don't know what I'm about to say, but we'll figure it out. And then there's Kamala Harris. Poor Kamala. She was like that one friend who agreed to help you move and then somehow ends up carrying all the boxes whilst you stand there drinking water and giving moral support. She was supposed to be the right hand to Joe, but instead she was delegated to running behind him, fixing every little thing he broke. She's like, yeah, sure, Joe, you said you were going to go left, but here we are on a road trip to the middle of nowhere. Let me just take the wheel before this becomes a whole disaster. Sorry about the accent. Let's not forget Kamala's other role explaining to the American people why Joe's latest brain fart wasn't actually a brain fart. Every time Joe said something that sounded like he'd just time-travelled from 1987, Kamala had to swoop in like a superhero with a smile that says, "It's okay, everyone, don't panic. He's been doing this for decades." You could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She's like, honestly, at this point, it's either me or no one. And in the end, she had to take over, and that was a disaster.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
Coconut. It's not funny, is it? She ended up losing the election in a landslide. She was actually worse. And speaking of running things, let's talk about the real power players, the ones behind the scenes trying to hold it all together. You've got people like Ron Klain, the chief of staff. Now, imagine the stress of having to manage Joe Biden's calendar, which must have been like juggling knives whilst riding a unicycle on fire. There's a rumour that Ron has a side job as a magician. He was the one trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat every time Joe forgot to show up for meetings. I picture him standing in front of a wall of sticky notes that say, "Biden needs to take this meeting," or "Remember, the world is not ending yet," and still struggling to get him to the right place at the right time. And then there's Jake Sullivan, Joe's national security advisor. Now, Jake is like the guy at a party who's super chilled out, holding a drink in his hand, but secretly he's the one keeping the peace. Jake's job was to make sure that everything stayed in place, whilst Joe, over there, probably calling people the wrong name.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
Let's play it again.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
If Jake had $1 for every time he had to step in and say, "No, Joe, that's not what we agreed on," he'd probably be able to afford his own island by now. And we definitely can't leave Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, out. Oh my God, Karine, God bless her soul. She's probably the most patient person alive, answering questions like, "So when will President Biden finally remember what year it is?" with the kind of grace that would make even the Dalai Lama sweat.
He is as sharp as ever, as I have known him to be in my engagement and my experience with him.
Karen is there every day facing the press, trying to figure out how to explain why her boss just asked a reporter if they'd like some ice cream after this briefing, instead of answering a serious policy question. It's like watching someone at a family dinner trying to explain why Uncle Joe doesn't remember how to operate the microwave. Look, he's doing his best, okay? We've all been there. Just let him have the ice cream.
My name is Joe Biden. I'm Dr. Joe Biden's husband, and I ate Jenny's ice cream, chocolate chip. I came down because I heard there was chocolate chip ice cream. By the way, I have a whole refrigerator full upstairs. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. God.
But here's the thing. These people, as competent as they may seem on paper, can't quite seem to get it together. There's a reason why the Biden administration's greatest achievement is simply not burning down the White House. They keep stumbling over their own feet, trying to solve problems whilst accidentally creating new ones. It's like a comedy of errors where the main characters are just so nice, so well intended, and so completely out of their depth. You can't help but laugh and then cry a little. Every time Joe Biden would go up to speak, it was like a reality show, where we all tuned in just to see if he'll accidentally set off World War III or ask if the nation's capital is still in Washington, D.C. There's a feeling of collective, "Oh no, not again," every time he opened his mouth. But hey, they do say there's comfort in knowing we're all in this together, even if this is a very, very, very weird ride. And yet somehow they're still running the show. The Biden and Kamala team, it's really still Biden's team, is like a dysfunctional family. You know, the kind that can't quite get through Thanksgiving dinner without someone spilling gravy on the new carpet or red wine. They're not perfect, they're not polished, they're not even really good at it most of the time, but at least they're trying, right? They're like that cousin who insists on cooking at the family gathering but ends up making everything from scratch, and then the results are interesting to say the least. But in the end, isn't that the real story of Joe Biden's team? A bunch of folks who were trying their best, who got it wrong half of the time, but somehow managed to keep the ship only slightly afloat, even if it was listing sideways and leaking just a little. They're like that TV show you love to hate, and yet you find yourself watching it every week just to see what ridiculous thing happens next. So, hats off to Joe and his team for performing an absolute miracle running the country for 4 years. Let's hope in their parting weeks they don't set off a world war. I'll give them an A+ for effort on that one. Criticising Trump for his choices is laughable when you consider theirs. People in glass houses shouldn't really throw stones.